joined now by Cynthia Frelund of the NFL Network. Cynthia, how are you this morning?
I'm great, thank you. Happy Super Bowl. How are you?
We're good. How about so? Are you fully acclimated? It seemed kind of like a sleepy last week, but now that we're here, even though a lot of people predicted this, are you manufacturing excitement or is it real?
It's always real. The Super Bowl is so much fun. Radio Row, the energy is palpable. People are just like, obviously more fans come as it gets closer to the weekend. So it's even more fun once you start to see. I mean, Eagles fans, they're last time that they won the Super Bowl was when it was very cold and they were outside in Minnesota with their shirts off. So Chiefs fans do know how to act like they've been here before. Eagles fans, they still they still bring the heat. So I expect lots of funny things from them on Bourbon Street.
Yeah, that's kind of my first question. And describing the fan base is perfect, right? The Chiefs do expect to be here, and while I won't say like there's a sense of entitlement, there's definitely a sense of expectation levels. The Eagles are mad and fired up about everything, right? They want people to know that there's an opponent actually in this game. I made the case after the Chiefs won. I said, hey, I can appreciate excellence. I love execution. They're very good in crunch time. They're almost too good. For me, though, they just aren't compelling. Would you buy that as a deal just because they're way good and way efficient, so they're almost like, yeah, that's just kind of what they do. Like, is there a threshold?
I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I think both teams are playing the best football right now, so we're getting a really good game, and nothing's boring about it to me because I'd rather see an excellent game as opposed to something where it's like, I'm a Lions fan, right? If the Lions would have limped to the end with how many injuries they had, you would have been like, oh God, and been like, this doesn't feel like a fair fight. Whereas if Washington was there, it would have been like, oh, this upside. And then, on the other side, the Bills would have made it. Like there's great storylines abound, but let's be fair, these are the two best teams. So I don't know. I just feel like it's always great to see the two best teams at the end.
So Cynthia, as you're looking at this matchup, right? I've heard varying different kind of opinions on who should be favored here from a bunch of different people. I think it's really easy to look at the Eagles and say, man, they might be playing the best of anybody right now. And then you look at the other side and you go, do I really want to bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid? Like, how do you kind of weigh who's playing the best versus who's got the pedigree of being here? And just like, I almost put Mahomes in Brady mode where I'm just I never feel good betting against that guy in a playoff game.
I mean, are we really calling it Brady mode anymore? Because I think
his
if he gets this win,
yeah,
that's right. Like it's Mahomes mode now, But ultimately, I think it's a very interesting matchup because it does feel a little 50-50, right? If you ask me unit by unit to name who has the better team other than tight end and quarterback, I would give the edge to the Eagles in pretty much every category. Maybe the defensive lines are about equal, but every other category, and especially offensive line, I would give the edge to the Eagles. However, there's something about the postseason and the fact that, Patrick Mahomes with his legs in the postseason feels like this unquantifiable thing, right? So, I mean, it is though about as close as they come to me in terms of, I love that it's it's 1.5 points in Vegas, but it feels like it's anyone's game. It feels 50-50 for me.
Let me flip over to Jalen Hurts for a second on the heels of that, Cynthia. Does he need a Super Bowl win to be called a winner? Because he wins a ton. He's won every place he's been, yet he still is like the ... but guy. He appears to me to be a winner.
Well, that's because, look, he's in Philadelphia. Eagles fans, I was, making this joke yesterday. I have a lot of friends who are Eagles fans, and I'm like, listen, you guys could win the Super Bowl and be like, hey, we only won by 3 points. We could have won by at least 6. Like, something will always be wrong with Eagles fans. Like, they're never happy. They're never going to be satisfied. So part of it is a function of where he plays. Like, again, I'll go back. I'll do the analogy of Detroit, right? That's where I'm from, and Jared Goff is very much considered a winner in Detroit terms. And it's all about what are the expectations relative to the performance. And the expectations for the Lions were very low, and Jared Goff completely exceeded them. Whereas Eagles fans, they think, they already 2032, oh, we're going to the Super Bowl. We're going to blah, 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 blah. You know, like they always think they're going to win the Super Bowl. So the expectations are much higher. And if he doesn't win one, then they're always going to claim that, because that's the way that fan base operates. They like to be a little angry.
I do want to stay on Jalen Hurts for a second here, because I was listening to somebody this morning, and they were weirdly talking about the Hall of Fame resume of Eli Manning, right? And how much it mattered that his 2 Super Bowls came over Brady. How much does that matter? And Burrow, we see it get a ton of credit for being one of the guys that's beat Mahomes in the playoffs. Like, how much does that matter when we're talking about Jalen Hurts, as opposed to if he had beaten – if Josh Allen were to
Steve Young hadn't beat Stan Humphries, Steve Young would get his due, because he was a GOAT.
Yeah, like if it's Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson instead of Mahomes, if the Eagles get this thing done, like how much do you think that matters in the way we'll talk about Jalen?
I mean, to me, it doesn't matter at all, because they don't play each other, right? It's not like if you're telling me Jalen Carter sacked Patrick Mahomes 6 times, then I'm like, well, the darn Jalen Carter's really good, right? But if you're like, they play each other's defenses, so that one's always a hard one for me, because it's not like Eli Manning did like some one-on-one competition. Like it's just not. It's a hard one for me, because I don't see how they play each other's defenses. They don't play each other, so it's not basketball. It's not. I don't know. It's not one-on-one in any capacity there. But I think it always cements your legacy if you beat a team that's really good, and if you beat a team like Jalen Hurts, if the Eagles win, then he could say, I beat a team that was chasing history, going to be the first team in the modern Super Bowl era to three-peat. That's a huge feather in the cap, right? Like that's the one, not, it's Patrick Mahomes, but obviously Patrick Mahomes is the reason that they got there, et cetera.
I think, and I get it, it's star-studded with a litany of really, really good players, and we get to this stage, it's the Super Bowl, right? That's a thing. But I go back to some of these drafts that weren't that long. Shoot, with the Eagles, you could just look at 2024, right? Quinyon Mitchell plays, DeJean plays, Trotter Jr. plays, Johnny Wilson plays. Like, these guys drafted well. You look at the Chiefs 2022 draft, and I mean, outside of Sky Moore, I mean, the thing is going to be star-studded. How much do we forget that the front office and acquisition has played such a huge role when we start out conversations by talking about like Mahomes and Hurts, right? Like, the organizations are rock solid.
Well, and also, I mean, let's give credit where credit's due. They also drafted those quarterbacks. It's not like they're free agents that came over in some blockbuster trade too. I think a lot of really great opportunities to grow and to get those few free agents that aren't necessarily, football's made through the middle of the like roster. 1 is great. 53 we know is not maybe the best player on the team, but it's like, what's going on in 20 through 40, right? Like what's the middle doing? And that messy middle is really good by both teams. The Zach Bond is a really good example of this. Switching him over and having him play a different position this year completely changed his ability to affect football games. So it's not just how great they are at drafting. It's also how great they are at having a vision for how and both sides. You could make examples for both sides. The Chiefs Brett Veach is masterful considering how much they've paid, certain positions on that team. So, I think both teams, you're here because of your team construction, your roster construction. You're not here by accident. You're here because you did a great job in 1 through 53.
We're talking with Cynthia Frelund from the NFL Network. Cynthia, speaking of roster construction, we've talked about, at least DB and I have talked a lot about this with the Chiefs, but the Eagles are kind of in the same ballpark, that the average age of both of their rosters is about 26 years old, which would be in the 5 to 6 range in the league. How scary should that be for the rest of the league, that these two teams are by far already the best teams in the league, and they're also 2 of the youngest teams in the league?
Well, in some ways it's scary. In other ways, you're like, well, that means they've got some people who might be leaving, because if you think about it,
sure,
the 5th-year option isn't available for everyone. That only first rounders get that 5th-year option, and it's almost impossible to pay everyone. I mean, just ask L'Jarius Sneed. I'm sure he wishes he were playing, and I'm sure the Chiefs wish they could have kept him. Charvarius Ward. Like, I can name a bunch of players who are great on other teams because they had this foundation with the Chiefs, but So in some ways it could be scary, but in other ways, I mean, it's more scary that Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, it's more scary that they're under 30. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is 29 years old, and look at what he's already done. That's terrifying if I'm in the AFC West.
Cynthia, you said something interesting earlier and I think most people would agree with you. Like, if Mahomes wins this one, he's in a category on his own. When do you think we cross that deal where the number, because we debate this in all other sports, right? There's a couple of famous ones when it comes to titles. Why do you think that it's universally accepted that this puts Mahomes in a land of his own so soon after Brady was done playing with so many rings? Like, why are we willing to overlook, do you think, its totality to give Patrick his own deal?
I mean, I actually think he's already there. I think Patrick's already crossed the threshold. He kind of redefined what we expect of a quarterback. Like, Tom Brady was in his era the best that was doing it. And he also was operating out of the pocket. He was he was in that era, where I just think we're fully in a different era now. You need a quarterback that's going to be able to run, throw on the run, and of course, operate from the pocket. It just doesn't seem like the way that modern football, in the past 8 years even, is played. Look at why do we like Jaden Daniels so much? Why do we think he's so electric? I mean, the man set records for completion percentage and for how many rushing yards he had in a single season. So, it's rookie record. So that's, to me, I feel like Patrick Mahomes was the turning point where now every quarterback after that needs to have those traits in order to be a guy who really has a chance in the postseason.
Cynthia, it's speaking of Mahomes and Hurts again. It's funny because we brought up a couple times Mahomes' improvisation ability and his ability to run. Is it kind of ironic that even though Hurts is the better runner, we're so focused on Mahomes' ability to hurt people with his legs?
I mean, I think with part of it is that in the regular season, he doesn't run as often. In the postseason, he increases that. Like this year, it's the most dramatic increase we've seen, right? It's 3 times as often as the regular season, but it's always more in the postseason. So I think it's because what you see from Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, for that matter, those, improvisational skills, they come out to play in the postseason a little bit more than the regular season. Whereas Jalen Hurts, he's kind of doing it all year long. So it doesn't feel like a change, right? It feels like expected at this point.
Cynthia, when you're talking about like other storylines, there's a couple, at least for me, and maybe this is just like the former player, sentimental guy. I mean, I kind of want D-Hop to win just because the $2.4 million, the just wanting to win. He's been the man. He's been low maintenance versus a guy like, Brandon, who's coming back from the biceps injury early, even though this is his final year and the mentoring that he's done with this D-line. When you look at subplots, who do you think has the more compelling story to tell?
Well, I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is one of my favorite players in the entire league. So it's going to be hard pressed for me to say anything more than him. But I also think so I was informed yesterday, one of my friends from the Detroit Free Press has a very cool story about a bunch of former, I don't want to give away his story, but basically a bunch of former O-linemen really helping out all of the guys on the Chiefs O-line with like old playbooks and just trying to like help them navigate the switch on the left side of the line, moving from, obviously, we've seen moving from guard to left tackle, and it's going to be a cool story. And I think that's a great little subplot too, like former players just like helping the O-linemen out. So I think that's kind of sweet as well. But D-Hop, for me, I want the man in the end zone. I want him to, did you hear the story about his dad giving him a mink coat?
Yeah.
And, dear God, how can you not love him? He's just like been through a lot.
Cynthia, one of the storylines that I'm kind of fascinated by is just this whole Eagles dynamic, right? It's not that long ago. It felt like the wheels were falling off last year. Felt like early this year.
Listen to Hurts' press conference 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, it felt like Sirianni was going to get fired at any moment early this year. You listen to some of the, as DB said, some of the clips you hear coming out of the quarterback, and you're like, does anybody like anybody in this organization? Is like that storyline of how they went from wheels totally falling off to still not really liking each other, but winning a ton of football games. I'm just fascinated by that entire dynamic.
That feels like, Philadelphia in a nutshell to me. I mean, it was like, we hate each other. Like, I feel like if they don't win, they're going to be like, to Kellen Moore, they're going to be like, good luck with the Saints. Don't fly back on the plane. We'll just leave you here in New Orleans. Like, I feel like they're a crazy bunch, but kind of, I don't know, maybe getting it together has been in an area where, I mean, you saw like Brandon Graham basically like have to pull them back together. And, that veteran presence is huge. So maybe it's worked out. I'm not sure. I mean, if I have to see that stupid inner excellence book again, though, I might lose it. But other than that, I think they're working it out. They're working it out.
That wasn't on your Amazon wish list after you saw AJ Brown with it. You're not rocking inner excellence.
I'm not gonna lie. I rolled over that whole book thing. That I was like, knock it off.
My problem with that is like there's a lot of like great self-help books like that out there, and I think therapy is wonderful. I think it's great, but like to read it on the sideline just felt like a way to get the, I don't know, after all of those like AJ Brown being unhappy or AJ Brown and like after all those storylines to like accidentally be caught with a book like just felt too rehearsed. I don't know. Maybe I'm
no, listen. And you're pretty diplomatic too, so that's strong because. I 100% agree with you. I rolled my eyes from the get-go.
It's not like AJ Brown,
but I'm like a skeptic tinfoil hat guy too, Cynthia. So that's
not like AJ Brown's been drama-free his whole career either.
Right.
Like
he scores 2 touchdowns and they're dancing, and it's like, is this what you wanted to see? And I was like, you guys, knock it off.
I feel like here's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see George Pickens on the beach accidentally get caught reading like my favorite one is Nonviolent Communication, best book ever. He should be reading that on the beach. Like that's what I think. And then I would believe it's real.
Listen,
you know what I mean? Like in your off season, not when a camera's going to be there. Like then I could get down with that.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna swing. Like this is like a slider, Cynthia, that didn't slide. Even I can hit this one. I'm a Steelers guy. I try to be a Pickens guy. You know the book that I want him to read on the beach?
Yeah.
7 habits of highly effective people. Like, start with the basics, George. Start there. Let me jump over to some of the hires and are you worried at all that because history says coordinators being courted for head coaching jobs during the Super Bowl don't win a ton. And I'm not looking at Shanahan and Steichen most recently. The list is longer than that. Are you worried at all about Kellen Moore?
No.
Okay.
I'm not. No one. It's the Saints' job, and I'm saying this with all love because I love my Saints fans. But Saints' job is a hard one because their cap situation is very tricky, and they have to make some really hard decisions about quarterback and some aging players who are, beloved by the fan base. So that is a hard job with not a lot of, you need to be a real one to take that one at this point. And I think it's just a foregone conclusion. I don't think anything that happened this week changes any. Like I don't think it. I don't think that it's. I think the job process and interview process was over before this week. I just think they can't hire him yet because of the rules. So I don't think, in other words, I don't think he was distracted by trying to interview this week at all.
Cynthia, I've been thinking a lot about kind of paths to victory and what that would look like for each team. For the Eagles, if they end up winning this game, you think we'll be looking more at Jalen Hurts, who performed really well in the Super Bowl loss a couple years ago, Saquon Barkley, who's been killing it all year, or a third party that maybe a defensive player or someone that has a huge game? Like, have you kind of figured out what you think their path to victory is and what that would look like in terms of who's dominant for them?
I think their easiest path to victory would be if Saquon Barkley could keep ripping off 6-7 yards a clip. Like just something where like it doesn't need to be one explosive play. I think you're always going to kind of have that happening, but I think it can't be Saquon Barkley averaging 7 yards per play. Otherwise your defense will just get worn down. The clock will get worn down. Everyone will get tired. That's where they'd have the biggest problem. However, if I were not an NFL employee and I thought of a fun thing to bet on, I would say maybe Jalen Carter to become the, just the 11th defensive player ever to win MVP. I just think the long odds means better return on investment, because if Jalen Carter has the disruptive kind of game where he could certainly have very easily, that could be a really big path to victory as well. But like I said, the Eagles' easiest path to winning is if Saquon Barkley is just like so freaking consistent with making them, get a new set of downs every time he touches the ball. That's going to be really hard to stop.
I kind of like your defensive thing. The D-line is a safe pick because they're so good. Look at Bond and DeJean. DeJean in the nickel and Bond out in coverage, with maybe making a play or two with how good Kelsey and the Chiefs are with their intermediate passing game. Like, that's a fascinating matchup. And on the heels of that, I'll get you out of here on this, Cynthia.
Yeah.
Do you remember a team with as complete a roster as the Eagles coming across as, in a tight line game, such an afterthought? As tight as this line is, it still seems like it's almost insurmountable for the Eagles. That's the feel I get nationally.
Well, you mentioned Cooper DeJean and also Quinyon Mitchell, and I think those are two key pieces that are so different from last time to this time that make a huge difference, because I don't know if they know exactly how hard it is to beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, because as rookies, they haven't worked their whole career to get here. That this is their first season. Not to say that they're not appreciative of the moment. I just don't know if they realize how hard this is.
That's Cynthia Frelund, NFL Network. Cynthia, we appreciate your time. As always, enjoy the rest of your Super Bowl week and enjoy the game.
You got it. Have a great one, guys. Happy
Thanks.
Super Bowl.